Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and my camera's messed up. Hold on, let me fix this real quick. Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and this is your lore update. There is a lot going on at the moment with the Drifter crisis, and today is a great opportunity to kind of follow up from my previous lore speedrun video, which is over 2 years old now. So while my original plan was to basically pick up where that video left off with the Authanoon events and the stuff with that, given the focus on the Drifter stuff, I wanted to maybe go a little bit further back in order to kind of make sure that we understand the Drifter story as a whole, and then also kind of jump in with the story arc as it started in 2022, or I think it was, with the empires going to war. So, which is basically where we left off with the Eve lore speedrun. So to begin with, though, a few years back, I did make this video called Who Are the Drifters? I made it on Talking in Stations. I never moved it back over to my channel, even though I thought I might want to. But we're going to start here, and then we'll go through the whole story. And this is going to be interesting because I haven't watched this in a little while, so maybe I'll have something to say to myself, but we're going to start here. Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and I am very...
21,000 years.
Enjoy.
By 2730 AD, nearly 21,000 years before the modern era, the human race had colonized its home system of Sol. Within 5,000 years, humanity had stretched out to consume all resources within the range of their warp drive technology. Near the end of the 8th millennia, a miracle came to the human race in the form of a semi-stable wormhole, which connected them to a previously undiscovered land of prosperity. Within a few short years, the largest colonization effort in human history began as countless souls poured through the Eve Gate and into New Eden. However, the fortunes of mankind took a turn less than a century later in 8061 when the Eve Gate collapsed, cutting off the colonies of New Eden Cluster from Terra. The cost was devastating to those remaining. Countless colonies were lost, and the very history of mankind faded into legend. Little is known from this prehistory, but we do know of the existence of 3 civilizations that held influence in those early days. The Yanyong, masters of gravitonic technology and force field theory, settled in the Deathless region in modern-day Galente space, but all records of them end around the year 9000 AD. Unsettlingly, the remains of the Talakan Empire, which mostly are found in the mysterious Anoikis, a series of far-flung star systems accessible in the modern day only through unstable wormholes, seem to have also fallen from power at about this time. Of all of the ancient empires, the only one whom we have met in the modern era are the enigmatic Jovian. Being a relatively primitive civilization compared to their contemporaries, the Jovians survived the Eve Gate collapse by having their entire civilization loaded on immense arcs and shuffled at barely faster than light speeds. The majority of the population remained in suspended animation in a virtual reality environment known as the Construct. Those inside of the Construct used the time dilation of the simulation to rapidly advance their civilization beyond anything imaginable in the physical world. Soon, the limitations of reality were no match for this new civilization. To protect them from corruption and to ensure a tether to reality, a law was established in the early days known as the One Body, One Mind Law, which simply states that for you to have a consciousness within the Construct, one must also have a physical body connected to it. This serves 2 purposes. First, it makes sure that each being inside of the Construct was at least once human, but also, the Construct itself was eventually transformed to use the brains of those connected to it as part of its computational systems. Thus, removing the physical body would disrupt a part of the Construct, or even take parts with it. Outside of the Construct, the Jovians had gone through 3 distinct empires. The first collapse occurred when the highly engineered Elders began suppressing the biological experimentation of the other Jovians. When Michael Bohr reunited the Jovians in a second empire, they began performing increasingly bizarre experiments on themselves, causing both the Jovian disease and the formation of the sleeper civilization out of those living in the Construct. The Jovian disease is not so much of an actual disease as an engineered defect in Jovian biology that causes melancholy, madness, and death to all Jovians on a long enough timeline. Eventually, the Jovians turned to those who lived inside of the construct looking for answers to the disease, and the only solution was to enter the suspended animation and join them within the construct. The conflict and disorder that came from this era is known only as the Shrouded Days, and no one, not even the remaining Joves, seem to fully understand what happened in those days. What does seem to be true is that eventually those inside of the construct, now known as Sleepers, fled the Jovians, eventually settling in what we now know as Wormhole Space, or Noikus. The remaining Jovians migrated to modern-day Jove space and continued to struggle against the disease as they monitored the younger empires, now only emerging from the Dark Ages. Eventually, modern politics, in combination with the uncontrollable disease, led the Jovians to retreat further and further from the rest of New Eden. But as one empire falls, another rises. Deep inside of Noikus, separated from New Eden by unfathomable time and space, a violation of the construct was born. Without the shepherding of those outside of the construct, an entity which violated the one body, one mind law appeared within the construct. A small child with black eyes that had never been born and had never had a physical body. This thing was called the Other and was rejected and hated by the Sleepers. But this seems to have only fueled its desire to take over and consume. And over time, more of these defects were made.
You guys follow so far? There was a construct made, a virtual reality construct, and in that, these artificial intelligences began to emerge, known as the Other, which were violations of that construct's rules.
A little over a decade and a half ago, in the year YC-105, the Empire of Amarr was having their own trouble. The Emperor, Hadrian VII, ruler of Amarr for 3 centuries, had died of turret disease on August 28, YC-105. The Amarr Empire is ruled by a small handful of noble houses, each with a selected heir to head the house. When the time came, the heirs competed with one another in a process known as the succession trials. The winner becomes the new emperor or empress, and the losers must commit suicide in a ritual that is known as the Rite of Shathal Sin. So when the 5 houses competed in YC-105, Dorian Corazor was chosen and became Emperor Dorium II. But this did not settle the issues within the empire. Jamil Sorum, the heir to the highly militant Sorum house, was reluctant to give her life in the ancient traditions, and when she lost, conspired with her loyalists on a plan to cheat death.
I've tried to look up what this whole Tourette's disease is, and it's just, they just mention it. They're just like, hey, yeah, he died of Tourette's disease, and they move on.
The very flesh of the heirs is seen to be sacred by the Amarr, so the idea of cloning a body and mind of Jamil was against Amarr scriptures, but this did not stop Jamil's loyal follower Phallic Grange from secretly cloning her at the Matriarch's Citadel. These events had not gone unnoticed in Noikus. The Other reached out across the cosmos and discovered the plot to illegally and secretly clone the failed heir to the Amarr's throne. When her mind was transported to the Matriarch's Citadel, the Other hopped on board and stitched itself into her brain. Once there, the Other whispered into the heir's mind, teaching her the secrets of ancient technology and revealing the location and function of an incredibly powerful superweapon, which she then used to defeat the Elder fleet of the Mimitar as they flew above Jamil's birth planet in Sorum Prime. The recent assassination of Dorium II had plunged the Amarr into chaos, and Jamil's triumphant return had been deemed a miracle of God. This led to Jamil being crowned the Empress of Amarr. After using the weapon, she discarded it to allow it to fall into the hands of the Road Drones, a hive that is also likely under control of the Other. A Sisters of Eve ship that was doing investigation on the Eve Gate, where the weapon was first found, traced the energy readings to the weapon's location. A Blood Raider group trailed the SOE ship and witnessed them being destroyed by the Road Drone hive. However, the Blood Raiders, probably through the help of the Society of Conscious Thought, or at the very least some Jovians, were able to disable the drones. The Blood Raiders would have acquired the weapon for themselves and brought upon an endless harvest of blood, if not for the valiant Thuckers, a tribal ship and crew who chose to sacrifice themselves to destroy the weapon rather than to let it fall into the wrong hands. The explosion triggered the Isogen 5 that was being packed inside of Jamil's ship and the hive surrounding it. This cache of Isogen 5 was one of several that was created by...
Swear to God, if I made a lore bingo sheet, Isogen 5 would be the centerpiece.
the pre-Dark Age empires and stored near certain stars. Isogen 5 itself is a super rare isotope of isogen that seems to only occur around certain blue stars and have unheard of gravitonic properties. To make matters worse, this cache was quantumly entangled with at least 9 other caches, which also exploded simultaneously. These explosions poured energy into the local stars, causing massive coronal mass injections, destroying the closest planet near each star. This is known as the Salient Incident, or the Apocrypha event. In addition to the shattered planet...
As an aside, there I am right there in this picture on the far left side. This was so exciting to me in 2015. This was like the first, like, oh my god, I'm in the lore. Oh my god, I'm in the lore.
Salient Incident, or the Apocrypha event. In addition to the shattered planets created by the explosions, numerous traversable temporal defects known as wormholes began appearing, leading people to discover temporary shortcuts between distant stars, as well as connecting them to the long-lost Anoikis. Still in partial control of Jamil, the other pushed her to send her scientists into the uncharted space, breaching the sleeper conclaves and extracting the suspended bodies of the sleepers. They then used the sleeper implants to make their first immortal foot soldiers, the Templars. Inside of the construct, the other used this chance to imprison rebellious sleepers and to send out copies of the other into the minds of the Templars. Eventually, the dangers of the Templar was discovered, and most were purged. Most. Now partially freed from the construct, the other constructed massive hives and cracked open the sleeper enclaves, using the bodies itself to puppet them in order to control their newly developed warship, the Drifter battleship. Around this time, something happened that the other didn't expect. The stars we now know as Anoikis were stitched together by the ancient Talakan. They did so by constructing a Dyson swarm lattice around stars and using the energy to punch holes into reality and traverse them using static gates. One such star, W477 TAC-P, is located in what is now Jovian space. The explosion from the Isogen 5 caches sent energy through the network, pouring into W477 TAC-P and damaging the lattice around it. Several years later, in YC-117, W477 TAC-P exploded, causing an even larger event, blowing open the inner chambers of Anoikis and leading the Drifter forces to pour into known space, and began exploring and dismantling the sleeper caches and Jovian observatories that had up until this point been cloaked and observing us for nearly 100 years. In the modern era, this event is known as the Caroline Star event. What they want is unclear. They have 5 wormholes, each named after a kind of fortification. Inside of each is a hive, filled with drifter battleships and support cruisers. Highland Tukos warned us of a great invasion that never seemed to have come. However, at the center of each of these hives is a massive vortex of energy surrounding a pile of what may have been fragments taken from the observatories. Additionally, from the records that we have gained from the Triglavians, we have discovered that these drifters have entered into abyssal dead space and disrupted the Triglavian collective that had been hiding there since the end of the Second Jovian Empire, the very same empire that drove the sleepers off over 2,000 years ago. The Triglavians see the drifters as heirs to the Second Jovian Empire, and while they do not understand their artificial nature fully, they identify them as the ancient enemy Azdaja, or the ancient enemy dragon. Now the drifters are arriving in force in Poshvin, and the Triglavians are warping space-time to gain a foothold into K-space. This ancient war has spilled out into the modern day as the Precursor Crisis.
All right. Cool. Great. All right. So this is, that is, I mean, pretty good summary of it all. I do have a much longer series of videos, which are a playlist that I've put together from CCP throughout the years that includes a lot of this stuff, including the Empyrean Age trailers, the origins, the crowning of Jamil, the finding of the clone bodies, the implants, so on and so forth. The Shattered Worlds, Caroline Star, Drifter Autopsy, etc., etc. But a lot of that is very good. That pretty much gets us covered up to where we're at with when it comes to the drifters, because in a lot of ways with the Triglavians, the drifters kind of quieted down for a little while. But we're going to go back a little bit and we're going to talk about a guy by the name of the Deathless. So one thing that's worth noting when it comes to the Deathless, and as we're going through this whole story, where is it? Empire story arc begins. So this is the story as it begins in 2022. And one of the big things about the Deathless, if we go here, we can see the Deathless allegedly gets his start in 2008 in YC-110, where he is on Caldari Prime during the attacks of the Empyrean Age. He then leaves and goes and does his own archaeological research, which ends up being fairly fruitless. He then, his searches run dry, and so then he gets picked up. He decides to try to go deeper into the unknown, because everything he finds is stuff that's already been picked through. So he wants to find something further out in space. And he gets picked up by a caravan of Thucker, and he falls in with them, and they kind of teach him about the broader world. And when he goes back to his own people, like he discovers that with the Thucker, they learn about the Jovian enclaves, and they discover this object known as the Atavum, which is this gravitationally active object that we don't actually know fully what it's for yet, but it's a part of Jovian tech, and he begins to kind of look into this with those people, and he's seeing this as unlocking the mysteries of the Jovian civilization, which, of course, as an SSCT member, Society of Conscious Thoughts, they are, the Society of Conscious Thought was created by the Jovian Empire, and arguably it's like an export of the Jovian Empire to the rest of the peoples. It's now an academy of sorts that exists outside of the Jovian Empire, but is still probably it's the closest thing to the Jovian Empire that we have in the modern day. And in fact, the SSCT has inherited the authority of the Jovian Empire after the Caroline Star event, when the Jovians all left. So either way, he goes and when he tries to talk to his own people about it, the SSCT try to get him to betray his new friends. He doesn't like that. So he goes, he seems to have left them, but he also disappears for like a whole year, where he's captured yet again. But he finds a new ally in this lady named Soldran, who I believe is a Caldari person. So now he's got the Thucker tribe people for his connections to the Mimitar, and he's got Soldran with her connections to the Caldari. And from this, they begin to build this network of contacts that begins to be known as the Circle. And they're digging deeper and deeper into Drifter into Jovian tech and whatnot. The society, in its arrogance, believes that it has learned all the secrets of its masters, i.e. the Jove, yet they do not know the truth of what they keep locked away, let alone the location of a key. Now the passages have collapsed and the secrets are buried, referring to the Jovian stargates going down. It is a jealous act of diminished civilization, a meager span of light years, yet completely unreachable. However, if I've learned anything on my travel, is that the boundaries of impossible diminish as perspective grows. The great divide we must cross is not one of space, but of our own ignorance. He's talking about being locked out of Jovian space now. He goes, so then he sees the drifters. When Soldran shows me today's newscast, a shiver ran through me. Their vessels are pale imitations of the original, but there is no mistaking their design. Despite the Third Empire's selective memory, my research has revealed the horrors of their forebearers. Any who would adopt the mantle of those dark days is a threat to us all. The empires are struggling to understand these drifters, but I know what they seek. They have awoken just as the gates to paradise slam shut. Should they find a way to do in before we do, true tyranny will return to New Eden. So this actually is an interesting question, which is that we don't actually know why Caroline Star happened. Like, we don't know if the drifters did it intentionally, although there is some reports from Highland Tukos that seems to suggest that the drifters were unprepared for the Caroline Star disaster and the resulting wormholes opening from it. That said, he's implying here that this also possibly blocked their way into Jovian space. This is something I've said since 2015, basically, since Inheritance, since all of these things, that Jovian space is kind of the crown jewel of all of these objectives, It's a giant cache of information and technology that is kind of lost to time at this point. The Third Jovian Empire were not necessarily, or are definitely not as advanced as the Second Jovian Empire, who lived in Utopia, but their stuff is probably more modern. Either way, so from there, he discovers the location of Zarzak. They could have caused it, not known how, but the fallout would be. So in Inheritance, they talk about how, energy flows, and it can flow both ways, right? So effectively, what it appears has happened is the Talican created a Dyson swarm around a star, possibly more than one, which is the primary objective of which is to siphon power. They have all these different power collectors that then link themselves to a managing station, which then powers other things. But it seems that the Talican used this in order to use the massive amount of power of a star to warp space-time in order to connect systems together that would not have necessarily been able to be linked together via just normal spatial topology. They're using massive amounts of power in these stars to make possibly permanent warps to space-time in order to make this possible, right? So the entire network was originally powered by these stars like W477 TAC-P. Now, when the Isogen 5 criticality event occurred, and it detonated the Isogen 5 in the 10 different locations, it poured the energy from the explosion into the star itself, which caused a secondary reaction of a coronal mass injection, which is what just shatters the first planet of those different systems. And the idea was that those explosions were channeled along magnetic lines. So there's something that they were intentionally doing by channeling all these explosions, in which the Isogen 5 was merely functioning as a primer to trigger a deeper reaction within the stars itself. So this immense outpouring of energy appears to have coursed through the Talican's network of connections, and is one of the things that caused the wormholes to begin to open and close. It's almost as if they had these connections that they were able to make with like their static gates or whatever back in the day, and so they've punched holes in reality like Swiss cheese, and now with the amount of energy that was released during the Isogen 5 criticality event, now those holes are kind of spasming, opening and closing. That's what I like to think of it as, which is what we think of as wormholes as we know them. But the other thing that it did was it poured a whole bunch of feedback energy into the star of WW477 TAC-P. And that damaged the lattice and destabilized the star. And so they knew that time was short, and about a decade later, a little under a decade later, it blew up for realsy. And that explosion was what we know of as Caroline Star, which was significantly more energy than even the criticality event, it would seem. So, but one of the things is in Inheritance, they do point out that nobody was actually monitoring W477 TAC-P at the time of its detonation. So it could very well be that the drifters went in and did it, but like, we don't really see a reason why they would want to do that. You could argue that they were trying to blow their own way open because the drifter holes begin to open up right after that. The second explosion seems to have blown open the inner rooms of Anoikis, as it were. But again, Highland Tukos seemed to suggest that they were in disarray with it happening. So I don't know if it's necessarily something that was intentional. It might have been something that they just were prepared for or they capitalized on. But yeah, so that's kind of how the criticality event and the Caroline Star event are related. Okay. Yeah, they could have caused it without knowing what the fallout would be, but again, like, I don't know why they would necessarily do it, but I don't know why a lot when it comes to the drifters, now that I think about it. So, moving on. But, so, from site to site, we trace the lines of connections and discover a point of convergence. Now we just must reach it. So they find mapping all of these different things when it comes to Jovian tech and knowledge and this Atavum stuff that they were investigating leads them to Zarzak, which they all go into Zarzak. He brings his little caravan in there. They get stuck in there, but they find the fulcrum, and that's when he plugs himself in and becomes who is now known as the Deathless, okay? With the three worlds, a world of substance, a world of dreams, and a world beyond. The fulcrum has shown me so much, and in return has consumed my limitations. It has taught me a new name, a mantle grated to those who it has chosen. Should it be granted? Should it be granted? Yes. He was not reduced to small shreds. A mantle granted to those who is chosen, those who have stepped beyond the meager limitations of their body so as to exist in all three worlds, the Deathless, okay? So the important thing here is that this happened in 2015. So this is all around the same time as the Drifters, but this is before we ever heard of anything involving the Deathless. So then, in 2018, we have the civil war that's going on in Shendeli, which is a Galente planet, one of the member empire nations of the Galente Federation, the Yinmei, who have a fierce caste system. They're having a civil war where the elites were attempting to impose their rule on the lower castes, and the mercenary corporations were being involved in that, including Entire Direct Action, Ostracon Agency, and Sekal Expeditionary Group. Now, we know that Sekal Expeditionary Group has connections with Thucker, and we believe that Entire Direct Action has connections with Soldrin. So, either way, these three organizations are pulled out of the Shendeli Civil War, which effectively kind of brings it to a halt at the time. But this is only really important because immediately after that, about 10 days later, we get reports that there is investigations into Serpentis fleet strength. So they suggest that an unusual statement by General Karashi follows unconfirmed reports of a stolen copy of the FIO dossier on the Serpentis military buildup, making its way into the hands of the entity only known as the Deathless. While being confused as to the exact nature of the Deathless, these reports allege that this identifier was used in the hiring of several mercenary corporations previously active on the planet Shendeli. So we don't actually know when these guys get involved in the Civil War, but we do know that I assume this is the same Deathless. It seems pretty obvious that it's the same Deathless. So this would be, he's already plugged into the fulcrum. So he likely, like, what I believe happened was he has these different contacts within the Caldari Underground through Soldrin, with the Thucker caravan, the Harada Oki, and whatnot. And then with his gaining access to the fulcrum and becoming the Deathless, that kind of gets him a lot more clout. So he is able to use those contacts to his own advantages. So, Triglavians are not involved yet. So, either way, the point is that he's already getting involved in kind of galactic politics through acting as the intermediary for these different mercenary corporations. And we get more confirmation about this. Or no, we don't get more confirmation. Then, a year later, when... So... that Serpentis buildup became a big deal because so the Deathless seems to have handed over that dossier to Upwell, who then proceeds to begin attacking the Serpentis using Entire Direct Action and Ostracon Agency ironically. I believe. Either way, eventually the Empires get mad because Upwell who's a relatively new player at this point, is making these attacks, so they force them to divest their ownership a year later, divest their ownership to the Scope. The Scope takes over as a official brokering services between players and entities in-game, like Empires. A year later, the Scope hands over that program to another unknown organization, which appears to be a consortium that includes Ostracon Agency and Antara Direct Action. And it appears that the Ostracon Agency, were the primary people that take it over, because this is the thing that eventually becomes what we now know of as the Agency. Okay? So then there are some raids that are conducted against the Serpentis. Oh, this is out of order. Yeah. See, they used entire direct action and Ostracon Agency to attack the Serpentis. Then it was divested. Blah blah blah. But also in 2016, he was supposedly seen a couple times, but we now know that these reports must be false, or at least not him. With the black and red skull bandana, unless of course he can unhook from the fulcrum, which we don't have any reason to believe that he's been wandering around too much since then. But so that's kind of where the Deathless starts from. So then we're going to fast forward all the way back to 2022, where in February, a group of Angel Cartel members suddenly attack and breach an ore vessel. So Ore is working on their new compression technology, and the Angels attack while that's happening.
The Angel Cartel has been confirmed to be behind an armed incursion into an Outer Ring Excavations research and development station in the 4C-TAC B7X system, carried out last week. Hijacking of the Rorqual-class industrial capital ship Esperance was evidently the main objective of this operation. The Esperance was being used by Outer Ring Excavations for the testing of prototype moon ore compression technology. Heavily armed cartel commandos infiltrated the station using a captured Bowhead-class freighter, the Astrolabe, which was scheduled to deliver equipment and supplies to the Esperance. Once docked at the 4C-TAC B7X station, disguised and equipped with forged biometric identity chips, the Angels managed to load their hidden assault team containers onto the Esperance unopposed. Once in place, the infiltrators struck and heavily armed commandos emerged from the containers. In mere minutes, the Angels took over the ship, powered up, and executed an emergency undock procedure. By the time the alarm was raised and Ore security teams were at the docks, the Esperance had warped away. It is believed that the ship jumped out of the system with its prototype compression technology long before Ore defense squadrons could respond. The Scope was invited to meet with Outer Ring Excavations CEO Afat Asset on board the Astrolabe earlier today. The interior of the freighter shows clear evidence of a deadly and ruthless assault, but with most of its logs wiped, information on the hijacking is partial at best. The means by which the Angel Cartel assault team managed to board and capture the Astrolabe is unclear, but it is suspected that the attackers hid in the specially modified cargo containers until the ship was underway. With typical Angel Cartel disdain for law enforcement, the attackers made no attempt to hide their affiliation. Indeed, it appears a single audiovisual log from the Astrolabe was deliberately left untouched.
Well, hold on. What is that? Wait, what is that? Hold on. Wait, oh, hold on. So that's a person. What does that mean? Somebody posted about it in the forums, and it's the only thing that I can find. What? Does anybody know what this means? I don't know. I've got nothing. I don't know if it's like it hovers on this for so long. It feels like it should be something meaningful, right? Cattle awaits death. I mean, maybe that ironically like works really, really well. Yeah, you just shuffle, like you just switch the first two letters to the end. Oh no, because the last one's the third letter, but you know what I mean. Cattle awaits death. I don't know.
Indeed, it appears a single audiovisual log from the astrolabe was deliberately left untouched. This disturbing record shows that at least some of the freighter's doomed crew were cruelly ejected into space after their surrender. CEO Afet Asset made the following statement.
Citizens of New Eden, we came under attack last week when the peaceful mining vessel Esperance was hijacked by cowardly members of the Angel Cartel. The work carried out on the Esperance by its brave and selfless crew will in the long run benefit every man, woman and child of New Eden. Given a prototype moon ore compressor was installed aboard the ship, the Esperance was a unique and extremely valuable element in our development of materials compression technology. Integrated with the ore processing pipeline of our Rorqual-class vessels, this new technology is expected to deliver immense benefits to efficiency and logistics in the mining industries. Compressing moon ores and other harvestable resources will both reduce effective volume and shape the materials into more storage-efficient units. The breakthrough in material compression represented by this suite of technologies is set to revolutionize the mining industries of New Eden, leading to gains for all of our citizens. Of more immediate importance, however, is the fate of more than 50 of our key designers and technicians stationed on board the Esperance during the technology trials. These people are so much more than employees of Outer Ring excavations. They are human beings with families, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. All these people are now held against their will by a ruthless criminal cartel. The safe return of our people is the highest priority of OR and our partners in the Upwell Consortium. We have therefore decided to post a reward of 1 billion ISK for each and every one of our designers or key technicians rescued and returned safely to any of OR's 4 primary stations in the Outer Ring region. Furthermore, we are also keen to share our compression technology with capsuleers assisting in the search and recovery of our people. This will be done in the form of skill books developed to allow capsuleers to operate the new compression technologies. These skill books will be awarded via OR loyalty point stores to anyone who returns a sufficient amount of OR research data fragments recovered from the Angel Cartel or their allies to us. Thank you.
The scope will bring updates on the recovery of the people and materials that are so crucial to continuation of materials compression development.
So one thing that's important to note here is that Rafik Zohar, he's one of the characters that we've been introduced to. He is a commando in the Dominations. Now, the Dominations are the most secretive, highest ranking kind of command structure within the Angel Cartel. So this isn't just like some random dude. Most of the time we don't actually know, we're not supposed to know people within the Dominations. So he's one of the few people that we actually know is in the Dominations. We can also see that he did a raid on quantum helium shipments, hijacking, lots of hijacking and other such like that. So he's definitely like a shock troop commando leader dude.
This is Alton Hovery, reporting for the scope.
Let's see, anything in here that's worth pulling out. Now, this was during the Guardians Gala event, which, by the way, what we're watching right here is the reason why most of the events don't exist in the game anymore, I'm pretty sure. Because the problem is that this year, in 2022, they decided to make sure that all of the lore events that were all of the events that were happening were somehow tied into the lore. So we get this, and we get the Easter event, all that stuff, and the lore tied to it. But the problem is that at the end of the year, they handed over the events system to like the marketing team to kind of maintain the current events, because the people who were on the events team shifted their priority slightly to be more of a live storytelling team, right? So more things like Shadow Wars, less things like Guardians Gala. And unfortunately, what that meant was the events that had been really worked on to make them meaningful in 2022 also made them difficult to replicate them in subsequent years. The Crimson Harvest was surrounding around this Egmar, Vard, and Turner, which we'll be talking about when we get to that. And so they've been able to, I think, move a little bit about which target systems they're targeting for Crimson Harvest. But overall, the Crimson Harvest itself wasn't directly tied to what was going on in the lore at that exact moment, in the same way that the Guardians Gala and the Hunt were. And therefore, the Hunt and the Guardian Gala, because it takes a lot of extra work for them to redo it in order to make it so that it's not related to the stuff happening in 2022. They just haven't, and that's those events went away. Sad, but anyway. So then at the end of the event, we get the conclusion.
Just a month after their main research vessel, the Esperance, was hijacked by Angel Cartel commandos, Outer Ring Excavations have recovered from the incident and rolled out a new line of material compressors. Outer Ring Excavations released the following statement earlier today.
It is with pride and gratitude that we announce a technological breakthrough for the mining industry. We are introducing to market new material compressors designed to be used with our line of industrial command ships, the Porpoise, Orca, and Rorqual classes. Installed deep in the beating heart of the ships, these new compressors are equipped with powerful computer arrays and logistics firmware that can interface with other ships in mining fleets. These features allow for high-efficiency fleet logistics coordination, permitting rapid transfer, cargo handling, and compression of materials across a mining fleet. From now on, each ship in a mining operation will be able to compress materials in their own cargo hold, utilizing active shipboard compression technology modules fitted to industrial command ships in their fleet. Ice, gas, moon, and asteroid ore can be compressed, providing a significant increase in mining efficiency due to the reduced cargo space required by minerals. Compressed ice, moon, and asteroid ore may be refined in the usual manner, but compressed gas must be decompressed to be used as a resource, and here some losses are possible. This loss of gas can be minimized by skilled operators and by using equipment found in the Tatara refineries. We also are pleased to announce that improvements have been made to the Tatara refinery structure pipeline, applying to all materials. We here at Outer Ring Excavations would also like to use this opportunity to express our gratitude to those who assisted in returning to their families over 40 of our kidnapped staff. To mark this, we will be awarding medals, recognizing the efforts of those Capsuleers who have returned any of our researchers. It is in large part thanks to Capsuleer efforts in returning our staff and retrieving our stolen data that we have been able to complete the development of this new technology. Unfortunately, not all of our people have been brought back to their families, and once again, we urge Capsuleers to assist in making their safe return a reality. Thank you.
This is Alton Havery reporting for the Scope.
If you're just paying attention, like, remember, this is in 2022, so this is all stuff that has happened. This is the compression system that came out in 2022, okay? I don't want people watching and be like, oh, there's something new coming now? No. All right, so then, after that, we see Maltu Shakur become confirmed as the Samatar again. Nothing huge here. Kind of a quiet quiet time, although we do get a good picture of him addressing the people. And we do get a reminder that, like, Flosaswin and Yagalis, the Yagalis area, we've talked about Yagalis a lot. I've had plenty of videos about Yagalis. It's this center of kind of mysterious interest by various people, including Concord. It appears that some sort of ancient potential artificial intelligence awoken in Yagalis. But we haven't actually gotten a good follow-up to that in a while, so we're going to put a pin in that and come back to it another time. But then a little bit later, right as we get into April, there is another massive pirate event where this is related to the Easter event called the Hunt.
Residents and workers at the Jita 44 Trade Hub were astounded by the sight of hundreds of capsules exiting the station this morning. After the apparently unauthorized mass launch, the capsules quickly warped off into space before they could be contained by approaching Caldari Navy patrols. Caldari authorities have described the mass capsule launch as a combined theft, sabotage, and escape operation, believed to be a cover for Garista's agents being hunted in the Jita 44 station. The identity of those making their escape using these capsules remains mostly unknown, with indications many of the capsules were launched as automated decoys. However, the Caldari state has issued a general arrest warrant for Commander Ezri Hakuzosu, a military director of one of the Caldari Navy's research and development groups. Sources have informed the scope that Commander Hakuzosu is suspected to be the ringleader of a group of sleeper agents and defectors working deep undercover within the Caldari state over a considerable period of time. Commander Ezri Hakuzosu had been military director of a Navy research group on advanced capital ship construction and development, recently focusing on the venerable Phoenix-class Caldari dreadnoughts. It is assumed that at least some of the leaked information involves advances in capital shipbuilding technology. Caldari state officials urge all Caldari citizens to do their duty and hunt down these capsules and destroy them on sight. Capsules have been seen orbiting planets and moons and need to be scanned or probed down. Keys found in the wreckage of these capsules have been confirmed to access Garista's hunt outposts, which seem to be the escaping capsule rendezvous points. Any recoverable data or corpses are to be retrieved and handed over to the Caldari Navy through established trading protocols. There are indications that information of critical strategic importance to Caldari state interests was stolen by the infiltration group, with other empires and pirate organizations apparently making bids for any stolen information through the capsuleer market. The regions around Venal have seen a significant increase in Caldari Navy and Garista's activity, as ships on both sides attempt to scan down and retrieve the hijacked capsules. Occasional clashes between the fleets have also been reported. The Venal region seems to be the main destination of the hijacked capsules, supporting the theory of Garista's involvement in this operation. Like many outlaw groups, the Garista's pirates appear to have been upgrading and expanding their capital ship construction operations recently. There are also reported sightings from across the Venal region of some kind of mobile military shipyard guarded by Garista's forces.
I've yet to find that
Dedicated
place,
Garista's capital building shipyards have also been encountered, and capsuleers are advised to show extreme caution when approaching these heavily defended installations. The scope will continue to report as the situation develops. This is Alton Havery reporting for the scope.
Okay, so this Esri Hokusotsu, she decides to escape using these capsules. We get information from her. Actually, hold on, let's pull that up. The Deathless. She has these different logs that she that we've managed to recover, which shows her, a little bit of her operations, and she's dealing with a guy named Peacock. Now, in one of her posts, she refers to her tech guy. The Peacock told me he requested another operation against Ataris. I think it's a mistake. I told him as much, and he laughed it off. I think he was drunk or high. but you never know with him. I don't like that a merc like him is running this op, but Rabbit made him the connect back to the nest. Sparks told me he pulled off a job against the feds that the Black Eagles don't even know happened. Hard to believe. Now, I have long believed that this, given that the Peacock is Leopold and Valari, and Leopold has since shown to be an agent of the Deathless, most likely, that this job that he pulled off, again, that the Black Eagles don't even know happened, has to do with the stealing of the FIO dossier that ends up in the hands of the Deathless, way back when. In fact, it's very possible that the Peacock himself was the guy running around that the people were describing as the Deathless, but we don't know that necessarily. However, the Peacock was very brash and not careful when it came to meeting up at the Jita 44 bar. And so it seems like that's what they got caught, because he says, afterwards met the Peacock in the usual place. I don't know why he insists on using that bar. He'll get us all caught sooner or later. He passes on the net. I passed on the latest news on Firebird. As usually, tried to get some data out of me there and then. Do you think I carry around on me? I don't know what the Rabbit sees in him, but I'm saddled with this guy as a handler. I'll keep making a record of how these security lapses so I don't. And then the next thing we get is time to lose. Distributing data to all redundancies. Activating contingency omelet. All cell members dispersing until the egg farm is secured. This went to hell sooner than I had liked, but we got most of what we wanted. I won't be sorry to get out of these gods and spirits damned uniform at last. Let's hope the Rabbit is happy. So that is the Esri Hakazotsu, also known as the Tanuki. She escaped at that time, and last I checked is still in 6NJ8 TAC V, Garissa's production shipyards, as her location that she escaped to. That said, we'll be following more about Esri and Zohar as we go forward. So then, 22 days later, we get another Scope News article, or news video.
After almost 2 weeks of intensive hunting for Garissa's hijacked capsules in and around the Caldari State and Venal regions, search activity is ramping down. Although many of the infiltrator capsules were destroyed by Capsuleers and Caldari Navy forces, significant numbers appear to have reached safe haven in Venal or were rescued by Garissa's forces. The Garissa's pirates have released a propaganda holofilm showing the successful rescue of the suspected leader of their spy ring, Esri Hakuzosu. Shown in Garissa's garb, the former Caldari Navy commander and military director of a Navy research group on advanced capital ship construction made no statement. As is typical for the Garissas, the intention behind the release seems to be to taunt the Caldari state over their security lapses and the failure of the Caldari Navy to capture Esri Hakuzosu. It has become common knowledge that extensive Caldari research data on dreadnought construction technology was obtained by the Garissa's spy ring. It has recently become clear that data on a range of technologies hugely increasing the efficiency of capital component fabrication and shipbuilding techniques were also stolen by the spy ring. To add insult to injury, it appears that the failure of the Caldari Navy to prevent this information from falling into Garissa's hands has led to the information becoming widely available to other empires and factions. Due to Capsuleer involvement in the hunt for classified Caldari data fragments and their willingness to sell the data to all bidders, it is believed many factions will have acquired enough information to reduce their own capital ship and general shipbuilding costs. It is also rumored that a number of factions have acquired a lead in the acquisition of these technologies through a mysterious third party, speculated to be an underworld information broker and deal maker, involved in illegal arms trading, smuggling, and corporate espionage. Investigations of Esri Hakuzosu's movements in the period before the exposure and dramatic escape of her espionage ring have unearthed a visual record showing her visiting a popular Jita 4TAC4 social venue. Hakuzosu is seen at the Pulse Bar, apparently meeting an as-yet unidentified man. State counterintelligence is believed to be pursuing this lead and a number of others in the hunt for Hakuzosu and her associates. This is Alton Hovery, reporting for The Scope.
Okay. So there's a couple things that are important to what's going on right now, which is that, to go back a little bit, never mind, I was confused. So, a couple other pieces of information about this. The system of Intaki is a very important system historically. The Intaki are another member of the Gallente Federation. They are a largely almost Janist peaceful people. And so when the war with the Caldari happened, a lot of the Intaki took exception to this, and even some of them left the Federation and went off to go become the Intaki Syndicate. However, the system of Intaki and the people of Intaki remain and are Federation members. However, the system of Intaki itself was deep in the conflicted war zone between the Caldari and the Gallente. The system of Intaki can go back and forth in ownership. In 2018, I think it was, the Caldari took over Intaki, and Lydai looted a bunch of their monasteries and tech, as well as dumping a bunch of like bio waste on one of the planets there. It was a giant mess. And so this idea of like Intaki and balancing their independence as a member of the Gallente Federation, because their arrangement with the Gallente is a little bit less, or is not the same as the rest of them, because the Intaki were far along by the time the Gallente met them. So they are allowed to have a certain amount of independence. However, that also makes them vulnerable to the Caldari. So there was a peace agreement trying to be made just to resolve this issue once and for all, to add some stability for the Intaki people. And so a delegation of the Gallente Senate traveled to Jita 44 in order to meet with them about how to deal with Intaki. And that led to... We'll get to there.
Concord has made a major breakthrough in its fight against a rising tide of smuggling, uncovering a major network of smuggler and mercenary bases across New Eden. Sources in the Directive Enforcement Department have indicated that Thucker and Caldari organized crime and mercenary groups have played a key role in building up this network.
Thucker and Caldari mercenary organizations. So again, we're starting to see just those, that like every single step of the way, we're seeing the actions of this growing network, this growing circle, even though we don't know who they are yet.
Concord has shared this information with all empires and is requesting the assistance of Capsuleers in disrupting this extensive web of hideouts and dead drop hacking sites. Smuggler hideouts are reported to be spread across New Eden, including a number of bases hidden in the depths of wormhole space. Concord has broadcast the gravimetric and electromagnetic signatures of these locations so the illegal sites can be found using onboard ship scanners. Smuggler dead drop and stash sites have been detected in all regions, with these requiring scanning and hacking to discover and disrupt. Concord has declared that any materials recovered by Capsuleers in the course of dismantling the smuggling network will be legitimate salvage to be retained as payment for services to interstellar law and order. Against the background of increased criminal and smuggling activity, a serious diplomatic crisis has sprung up between the Caldari state and the Gallente Federation, as evidence has emerged pointing towards Gallente involvement in the recent mass defection of infiltrators and spies within the Caldari state. An investigation by Caldari counterintelligence has identified a man meeting with Ezri Hakuzosu days prior to her defection as Leopold Envalari, a Gallente diplomat attached to the federal consulate on the Jita 4-TAC-4 trade hub. Leopold Envalari appears to have been assisting the Gallente Senate delegation visiting the Caldari state 2 months ago. One key goal of the Senate delegation's visit was to explore possible avenues of achieving a peaceful resolution of the status of the long-disputed Intaki system. Located in the contested Placid region, the war-torn system contains Intaki Prime, homeworld of the Intaki people. Extensive militia warfare over the past decade has seen the system change hands dozens of times, with periods of lengthy occupation and even planetary raiding by Caldari forces. The Senate visit had ended just as the Garista's spy ring was exposed, and Leopold Vel'ash is reported to have returned to the Federation with the Gallente delegation. The Caldari state's chairman, Akimaka Saraki, is known to have been in direct communication with President Celis Agard of the Gallente Federation as diplomats on both sides scramble to swiftly resolve this sudden crisis. The Gallente Federation firmly denies any involvement in the infiltration of state military and research agencies by Garista spies, but this development has already set back discussions on the future of the Intaki system, causing alarm on Intaki Prime. Federal authorities are refusing to confirm or deny reports that Vel'ash has subsequently disappeared. The Caldari state has added Leopold Vel'ash to their most wanted list, ignoring Gallente protests at listing a federal diplomat as a wanted criminal. The Scope will report as the situation develops. This is Alton Havary, reporting for the Scope.
So that is Leopold Vel'ash. Like I said, we believe that he is a Deathless agent. Now, it does seem a little bit like there was a bit of a betrayal of Esri. Maybe he was just actually as kind of brash as Esri accuses him of. But there is one other piece of information that is worth noting, which is that if you look in this area here,
Osu days
down at the
prior to
bottom
her
here,
defection as Leopold.
That bartender, you can tell she's got some very specific bio augmentations. And more importantly, you can see this shoulder pad with these little bolts coming out of it, right? If we skip ahead for a while, we're going to skip this. We're going to come back to this video, but we can see here, this is Soldrun. We believe that this is Soldrun. And you can see that it is, in fact, her. It's the same suit. You've got the plugs on the shoulders, the stuff in the back. So it seems... Now, CCP could have just been reusing the asset or whatever. I don't know. Now, admittedly, this is 2 years almost before that other video came out. So, and we have seen her in a couple other places. I've followed her for a long time, back when we called her Alpadirch. But, so you can see that he had his finger, the Deathless has his fingers all up in this situation. And so the Caldari were researching better technology for building their dreads. That technology was stolen by Esri and sent out, and then the Deathless network distributed that to the rest of the pirates and empires and whatnot. And this is like the dread revamp that happened around this time and was setting up for like the Navy dreads to come over. We know now... We know that that's Soldrun. Are we 1,000% sure that we know that that's Soldrun? Because I know that we have the name Soldrun, but did they ever be like, that lady Soldrun who took the invitation to... I think that we're... Okay. Well then, yes, that is Soldrun. I'm being careful about what I say. Oh, that's right. You're right. We see pictures of her. Now. So, and that is Soldrun, correct. All right, so moving on. So, this leads to this is the lead up to FanFest in 2022. As you remember in the previous video, there's this focus on this smuggler ring. Now, this has been going on, this has been slowly building up for like the last year or two, actually several, longer than that, probably since 2018, slowly, but basically... especially in the war zone between the Gallente and the Caldari, the tensions between the Gallente and the Caldari have been profited on by an increasing amount of smuggling and other criminal activity within Black Rise. There was a blockade a few years back, and there's this whole criminal enterprise around getting around the blockades, and some of the megacorps were associated with it. It was a bunch, so. The idea of like the Caldari doing shady stuff, or at least having shady actors within the state that are doing stuff like that, and this increasing reliance on smuggling. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Sekal mercenary group is having a turf war with the Krulifer organization, which is another Mimitar group, and kind of scuffling with the Angels a little bit. But the Thukker are really good smugglers, so it's very likely that even as early as here, we see the Caldari working with the Thukker in order to smuggle in more weapons and other resources into the war zone to keep fanning the flame of this growing tension between the Gallente and the Caldari. Now, Akima Saraki, or Akimaka Saraki as I call him often, he is now the chairman of the CEP, the chief executive panel of the Caldari. So he's the closest thing to like a leader of the Caldari state that we have. He came to power after invasions when, during the Dread attacks, the CEP's tower was bombed by a terrorist, and that injured and put into a coma the previous CEP chairman. By the time before he could recover, Aki Makasaraki was put in interim position and then was made into the chairman of the CEP. He is a war hero from the invasion days, helping protect his system of, now I can't remember the name of it. Somebody will tell me it. Protecting his system from the Triglavians, leading the effort to fortify that system. But he gives a speech to the Caldari panel.
Cold wind remembers the darkest of days. When the rains of our world became laced with fire. One warrior's fierce duty seared a path to our future. The ultimate sacrifice made in blood and steel.
So he's invoking the heroic sacrifice of Toby Tobel when he
Caldari.
Piloted his carrier into Gallente Prime to allow the Caldari to escape. Hey, there's Soldrin.
Everything we are, we owe to our ideas. They fuel our rise as the heart of a raging storm. A beacon of strength and a shrine to our identity. Honor and preserve your family, your corporation, your state. Without hesitation, without remorse.
So like I said, the tensions between the Gallente and the Caldari continue to be flamed as more and more of these smugglers and ne'er-do-wells become involved in the war zone and around the war zone, leading to, this concord to hold this summit to address this smuggling problem. This is, of course, FanFest, which is then interrupted Remember, in the previous video, they talked about how the new smuggler network sites were being exposed by Concord, and Capsuleers were going to be able to, were going into there and breaking up the smuggler dens, right? So that was the beginning of this event, and then this unfolded a few days later in the middle of FanFest.
Capsuleers attending a session of the Interstellar Anti-Smuggling and Counter-Piracy Conference at the Jita 4 TAC 4 Trade Hub were surprised when a Concord presentation on rising smuggler activity was apparently hijacked by the very same smugglers.
Platitudes, blandishments, lies. You of all people know that Concord and the Empires have no interests in common with you. They have done nothing for you. They shall do nothing for you. How long will you listen to their empty words? In recent days, as is their pitiful habit, Concord has made use of you to advance their own agenda. These free trade outposts you have so willingly cleared of my associates have been taken over by Concord's worst, the Cerro. Perhaps you don't believe me? Check for yourself. I have broadcast the new signatures of those sites to all. Why should you not destroy the Sorrow bully boys? They have always sought to control you. Do their bidding no more. Open your eyes. Seize your destiny. And, if you would, join me, the Deathless.
Embarrassed by this intrusion, Concord officials have refused to comment on Sorrow activity at occupied smuggler outposts, other than to state that measures are simply being carried out to ensure the complete eradication of illegal smuggling activities. Any recent improvements in the strained diplomatic relationship between the Gallente Federation and the Caldari state have been overshadowed by claims that a Gallente diplomat was involved in a massive spy ring operating within the Caldari state. The Caldari State's chairman, Akimaka Saraki, delivered a fiery speech in a live broadcast from the Caldari Chief Executive Panel yesterday. The scheduled speech was reportedly originally aimed at promoting interstellar diplomacy due to the ongoing Jita 4 TAC 4 summit. However, with state corporations and citizens expressing outrage over the new allegations, the delivered speech leaned heavily into patriotic rhetoric and evoked previous hostilities with the Gallente state.
We remain Caldari, no matter the cost.
No direct response or comments have been made by the Gallente Federation so far, but Federation Navy and Customs Forces have been placed on heightened alert status. This is Alton Hovery, reporting for The Scope.
All right, so this goes on where, you know, we go after the Deathless. Now, obviously, again, this is likely not actually the Deathless. We do see the reference to the circle in the back, but, you know, at this time, the Deathless is in the chair. So, unless this is some sort of projection or whatever, or an agent acting in his behalf, you know, this is not necessarily the Deathless as we know him. In the system of Arshat, the Amar have begun building facilities around a captured stellar harvester. At about that same time, in the system of Othanoon, a mysterious station begins to decloak.